happening, but anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I wound up taking care of his place for him. But last summer, he rented his place, the whole island. If you want to experience a summer island, you can rent Oak Island. And then he rented the place from us and came over to Eagle instead. Mosquitoes were so bad on Oak Island.
Don't ask me.
I don't have any idea how I get into this situation. Last fall, well, I guess Ralph Stanley. I don't know Captain Ralph Stanley down Southwest Ave. He's part of the Marine Museum up there in Penobscot. I think he was kind of instrumental. He's called on us at Eagle for a number of years and talked about boats and engines and things like that. So we get into this history thing. I bet dollars to donuts, and people here know more about it than I do. No, Neva just want to know if I'd speak to the Historical Society here, and I guess I'll have to do some homework for that one. But about the oldest history I know about Eagle Island, I learned about 20 years ago, and the young fella paddled in there one evening and in these kayaks. I think one of the first ones I ever seen. And he was studying at the University of Maine at the time in geology, and he ended up spending the summer on Eagle and running around chipping rocks, and took them back and got them dated, and he sent us a full copy of his report that he had done for his thesis, for his graduate degree in geology. Unfortunately, in there was one paragraph where it said that Eagle Island was about 400 million years old. The rest of it I couldn't understand. We do have it, and one's interested in geology, there's a lot of information in there. And the other thing about that was interesting is that Butter Island, only half a mile past, is only about 200 million years old. Even though it was settled first, we got a head start on it. And the Weatherspoons, it wasn't actually the very first settlers, and the Quinns weren't the very first on Eagle, but the Weatherspoons were the ones that lasted it out on Butter, and the Quinns did on Eagle. And they Captain Weatherspoon, I talked to 1 or 2 people here at night. I was thinking about that, and maybe someone else here has had one. Nowadays they call a senior moment. Captain Weatherspoon had a first name, but do you think I can think of it? I can tell you the name of his son and his grandson, but what his name was right now, believe me. He came to this area. He was in the Revolution, and he was an officer under, like a secretary to General Henry Knox. And because Knox, he wound up over in Thomaston, and this Weatherspoon settled there on Butter Island. Second generation, second son there was, it's pretty hard to forget that. His name was Unadilla. And he lived 90 years on Butter Island. And Rodney Weatherspoon was a son of his. And he was on Butter and also on Eagle because he did 2 stints as a lightkeeper on Eagle Island. And that was, in the later 1800s. They were pretty prominent farmers there. Cultivated a lot of land, had a lot of sheep, and supposedly, I don't think this is right, but what do I know? May have been instrumental in the island getting its name because they shipped, they had, a herd of cattle, and they shipped a lot of butter. And that's one theory as to how Butter got its name. Another is the hill there on the east side used to become a goldenrod when it was this big yellow mound that would show up as you came up the bay. That's two stories that have come down through the years. Some of the early owners to the island and who Witherspoon bought from was a man named John Lee, one of the big landowners from up around Castine. And the islands in those early years were almost incidental, but in some of our early deeds you bought, Eagle Island, the Butter Island, and surrounding islands. Some of them say, well, the islands of the bay, they just threw in a few extras to make up the difference. So my great-great-grandfather settled there on Eagle in 1815, and the Witherspoons were on Butter at that time already. Great Spruce Head and Bear Island, there were families on some of those islands as well. They worked back and forth together. I was reading recently about there was a big schooner built. I'm going to get back to the Penobscot Museum and see there's some information on it up there. Big for those years in this part of the bay. She was about 75 feet long. I forget because they went by tonnage, and she was built for a whaler. That's what the records say. She was built on Eagle Island in 1855. But it's interesting that came through records like Lloyd's of London registry, and at least when that information was brought to my father, that story had never come down as oral history through the family, and we had no knowledge of it, but it's pretty well recorded, and I feel that there's a connection between Eagle and Butter there. The name of the schooner was UD, it said UD Vinyl Haven. Now, was it the UD and she was from Vinyl Haven? But UD was Unadilla Witherspoon. His middle initial was D. So I think, she either had something to do with the building or it was named for him. Our family did a similar thing. They run sheep and pretty much subsistence farming. There wasn't, because it's been hard to get your produce to market, but they did do that to some extent. Probably a lot of it to North Haven, Vinyl Haven, what they call the Fox Islands, and a lot of our family come from there. Samuel Quinn was the one that settled there in 1815. His wife was a carver from Vinyl Haven, and his father had been in that area. I don't know what become of him. The Quinn history is pretty easy because they're all there in the cemetery. Anytime.
Not all of them.
Not all of them, no, not yet. Still one standing. But prior to that, Samuel Quinn's father was Oliver, but I don't know if he's buried on the Fox Islands or not, or in Vinyl Haven possibly. But when I retire, I may look into some of this. Now we're getting up into the later part of the 1800s, and with this, some people now, they call it hospitality business. Some people come in for summers, and I think that and the fact that the lighthouse was on Eagle probably was a contributing factor to what has kept us hanging on there when all the other islands are pretty much abandoned. And It's sometimes gives you kind of a lonesome feeling. You get a report just recently from the state of Maine that says there's 79 islands in the unorganized territories of the state of Maine, one of which has 4 residents. Nobody on all the others. Around, because they're on the islands that are towns and they're in townships, but in the unorganized, which we are, and this whole group in the upper Penobscot Bay are in the unorganized territories, and we're taxed under the state, and what services we don't get don't come from the state. But we're making progress on that, and very proud to say that with the help of the state of Maine and working with Neville Hardy, we now have a deer isle dump sticker. We have a letter written by a lady who was, she was in the registry, not the registry of deeds, the registry of probate up there in the courthouse in Ellsworth. And she was doing genealogy on her family, which were in someplace north and west of Bangor, up in that part of the state. And she come across a story that some of these, it was a big family, and it wasn't uncommon. They farmed out some of the kids. They would send them out to the, well, they could do a little better, I guess. I hope they would. And this story was about some of those children getting farmed out to the Quinns of Eagle Island. And she got in touch with my father to see, and he didn't know about it. But in quite a yarn, she told about there was one of these children that was farmed out to the Quinns on Eagle, and she came there and worked there summers. There was summer people, family coming there then, and I believe this was in 1865 or 8 in that area, and their name was Tiffany. And so this farm girl and the summer fellow, the Tiffany, kind of hit it off there, got together after a few summers, and they were married. And they were so taken with Eagle Island that their first child, a daughter, they wanted to commemorate their summers on Eagle Island, and they thought they would, about naming this girl Eagle Island. Well, they had a little mercy in their soul, I guess. They didn't do that, but they come pretty close, and they turned that around, and she was named Isla Eagland. Isla Eagland Tiffany. And we actually have an album of pictures taken in 1892, and with a picture of this Isla Tiffany, and she in that book. I thought that was pretty interesting. An interesting thing to me about that was that it showed the beginning of people coming for the summers there to as part of the economy of the island. And as far back as that, we realized then that there were people coming to stay for the summer. Butter Island went out of the Witherspoon family and bought by 2 brothers from Boston, architects named Harrimans, and they started this New England Tent Club and put in a pretty spectacular subdivision that a lot of us would shudder to see today. 420 some lots on the south side of Butter Island, and a lot of promotion and pictures and a lot of advertising, because they built steamboat wharf there off the little nubble on the southeast point, and the steamers that came, Juliet and the Catherine, that came out of Rockland and went up South Brooksville, and Sedgwick went down through the reach that way, and they stopped there at Butter Island. And so you could you get aboard the steamers that ran from Boston to Rockland. You could board there, Boston, in 5 o'clock in the evening, and in noontime you could be on the dock at Butter Island. And round trip fare was $5.50. That brought you and all your dunnage up for the summer. You could stay at Butter Island. Now, that worked for a few people. They converted one of the big Weatherspoon barns there in what they called a casino. And we get a picture of that big stone fireplace in the end, you know, the balconies around up above, and big round tables down the middle. And we've got a lot of what's left of Butter Island, the lamps that were there, and the tables, and some of the china. Not much of that left, but we still got a little. And these people, they filled up the houses and things, but the idea of this tent club didn't exactly catch on. And a lot of people bought those lots sight unseen, but you know, they bought lot 3 on corner of C Street and Ocean Avenue. When they got to Butter Island, here was this baling twine run out through the sugar pasture, you know, and when the twine crossed, that was a lot. And, I don't think that they did too many of those, and my grandfather began to pick up a little trade on Eagle Island, folks looking for a place to stay. They added on over there, put the second level on the old original homestead where Helene and I are now, and then up on the height of land, the Hill House, that was built in 1895, and 12 bedrooms, that's all that was in it at the time. And that was picking up, they don't like to say overflow, but the story, it was, folks that wasn't too happy with camping in the sheep pasture. So that kind of set us up in this hospitality business. And that went on until the 1930s. 1931, actually. By then it was my father and my grandmother. My grandfather, John Quinn, had died in 1917, and they kept it going into the 30s. And two at that time, I guess, of the long-time boarders come there. Frank Smith, most of the people were from the Boston area. He was a wholesale grocer from Boston, big grocery stores there. And there's Greg right there. He'll recognize this name, Fat Lumber Man. It was called the Brockway Smith Company, which is now Brosco. Yeah. And that's, he had one of the first summer homes on Eagle Island. And it was really all family. The Smiths were there, and then there was another one called the Cleveland Cottage, and they were like brother-in-laws or whatever, the Hammonds, and he was the, you know, his stockbroker or something like that. And, so it was a pretty tight-knit community, and that actually was, my father always laid that to being part of the reason that they kind of shut them down, because they were not very open to new people coming in, you know, strange, something a little different. They liked their own tight little group that they had there, and it was hard to introduce new people into it. But it was that, and of course the hard times in through the 20s and 30s, you get into the Depression. They stopped taking boarders in 1931. Things got pretty quiet out there in the Bay then. Yeah. And there wasn't a lot going on. And you know, when I grew up there was well, there was still a couple other families. The light was still going. There was people at the lighthouse. And on the west end of the island, didn't get any representatives from that. Andrew Gove, a lot of people know from Stonington, he's an Eagle Islander, and his family, and left from there in late 40s, around 1950, someplace in that time, and my father moved us off of there in 1941. He had, after they closed the boarding house, he went to work for the Porter family. Great Spruce Head was captain of the Porter's yacht and sailed that through the 30s. And when Mr. Porter died, the yacht was sold, and he had to go to Camden. My oldest sister was old enough to go to school and high school, so the school closed on Eagle, and our family was moved off to Camden. I went all my school years there, all my school vacations on Eagle, but I had to stick it out in Camden, and for about 12 years. That casino on Butter Island, that was a big building. It made one of the Harriman's bands, as I said, that they sealed that up with, you see it in a lot of the cottages, about 2-inch matched fur. And when they closed up over there, my wife's grandfather, Ed Howard, was a caretaker for him at that time, and they gave him the barn, or any buildings that he wanted, I guess. And a lot of it was just, they just simply left, and the buildings went here and there. There's one of them, one of the cottages over in Sylvester's Cove came off from Butter Island. I think another one, I don't know how they did that, but moved those buildings, but one went to up in Bucks Harbor, South Brooksville. My father pointed one up to me up there. But my father and his younger brother, and maybe one or two other fellows, got hired by their Uncle Ed Howard, that would be Colleen's grandfather, to, they gave Dad, he said, you can have all that fur in there, to take the building down, what he was doing, and the rooms were lathered and plastered and sealed up with that, and well, they went over there in the winter time and looked at it, and they had some leaf springs off an old wagon spring that they was beating the plaster off the walls with, and getting that down, bundling up all the strapping and everything to save that, and tearing the laths off and saving those, and they kept one room, one little room that they stayed in while they was tearing everything else down. So Father told me one evening there was 4 or 5 of them in there, and they'd been playing cards and whatever, and it got late, and everybody was, they hadn't really gone to bed, but just sitting around dozing in their chairs, and they had these old couple of kerosene heaters and 3 or 4 lamps there, those old wick heaters they were, but Dad kind of woke up. He said after a while he had a heck of a headache and felt groggy, but then the lamps, the lamps had died way down, and he thought the lamp was out of oil. So he got up and opened the door, and when he did, whoa, the lamps backed right up. They all but asphyxiated themselves, all tucked into this room. One oxygen not to run the lamp. That was about the time that his younger brother, Barney, started, he had a knack for, he liked to write poems. And one of the first ones that we know that he wrote had to do with this, when they were tearing this barn down on Butter Island. And it's a little takeoff on another poem that's a little better known. This one is called Footprints on the Sands of Lime. Time, lime. from the plaster. It says Dirigo. Well, they didn't get into that, but when the Harrimans took over the island in their brochure, they changed the name of it from Butter Island. They took Dirigo out of the Maine seal, and that's what they called their island, and that's what I grew up knowing it as, but it's now pretty much gone back to be Butter Island. Just tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. Where do they get that stuff, I wonder? Some guy copped a lot of thunder for letting off that line of steam. Bring him to this blasted island, if this is what he calls a dream. Hit him with a ton of plaster and put him astride the topmost rafter. Lathe and sheathe the blooming jasper. Then soak him with a scantling beam. That sort of job gets my angora. His wisdom hurts my ears. Give him a pinch bar and a hammer, and he'll forget his dream he stammer. And nails as big as a banana will make him cuss himself to tears. That was probably in, I think they closed Butter Island. I think the last of the Harrimans were there was in 1916 is the last that they hit borders there. And Marnie would have been 13 years old. It was that, I think that winter. But anyway, they succeeded. The barn got taken apart and disassembled, and they moved it to Eagle Island and put it up again. It still stands there today. Those of you that have been there, it's right across from the cemetery down the middle of the island. It's not as big as it was on Butter, the same gambrel roof shape, and that's the Butter Island barn. My mother was the daughter of a lighthouse keeper there on Eagle Island, and my wife's mother was the daughter of a lighthouse keeper who came to Eagle Island. And it was about the only new blood they got there. And this letter came through the granddaughter of a lady who had been a lightkeeper there on the island. And my grandmother wrote this the year she died, in 1953. This was written in January. And this lady was cleaning out her mother's house and going through old papers, and she came across this letter and brought it to Helene and I a couple of weeks ago. See, she was 75 when she wrote this. And in answering her letter, and I'm sure they wrote, and how are you doing, and so forth. And she says, I'm perfectly contented here. I can't stand the noise. She's referring to, I think, going ashore. I love to go to the woods and work with John. That was her brother that Bob Williams just brought me a picture of. That my great uncle with the last horse that he worked the fields there at Eagle Island with, and I always thought he was my grandfather, say, for years. As a kid growing up, he lived there with my grandmother. His name was John. My grandfather was John Quinn. This was John Littlefield, and I was up there in the hayfield with him one day when I was probably maybe 8, 9 years old, and some folks come along and visiting, and he was asking him questions. He said, oh, I live here with my sister, and boy, that was me. And he was the farmer in the hand there and did the work. So she's telling about work in the woods with John. I helped trim and saw and split the firewood. No oil stove for me. We have 2 cows, 2 heifers, a horse, and a dozen hens. Just enough to keep us going. We keep well and enjoy life. What else could we ask for? John gets $50 a month, old age pension. I should. It's such a mess of red tape, I just won't bother. You know, you got 2 cows, a heifer, and a horse. Who could ask for more?
If you could say a little something about the schoolhouse that's there. When
Yeah, the school, yeah. The schoolhouse that is there now is what is always referred to as the new school. And, it was, I think it was built in about 1910. It looks just like the old school to me, except there's glass in all the windows. So we have pictures of both. The teachers usually only came for a year. Some stayed for 2, not many more than 2 years at a time. The families who had students in school took turns boarding the teachers. So they might stay at the lighthouse, for instance, for a few months, and then they'd board, with the Quinns, or they'd go down with the Browns, and that's, how they got through the year. There wasn't a separate dwelling for the teachers per se, but they boarded with the different families. It closed in 42, but it was open there was a school there even in the 1860s and 80s for a time, and then there was a time when the population would go down and it was closed, and then they'd open it up again. I believe they had to have 5 students, and when we were moved off, I had 2 sisters and a brother in school before I was old enough, and that left only the 3 oldest Goves in school there in 1941, 42. And we moved off. Sitting right behind you is my cousin Clifford Quinn, who had been just a little behind me, so I know he wasn't in school. And but his mother Edith is there, and she took over as postmaster. The post office was on Eagle then, and my mother had run it, and then Edith finished out that season. And then they also had to move off to put kids in school, and of course you read about it all the time. That's sort of the death knell of a community, is when the school goes. And I was 3 and a half when we moved off there. They tell me I used to go, but just to be a nuisance. 13, 14 kids sometimes in school there. Of course, families were bigger then. The Lighthouse families, the Ball family that was there on the light, 2 generations, a father and then his son. In those 2 families, there was 5 or 6 kids in school at different levels at one time, and some of the pictures would be grown kids in a teenage, and then all the way down to the little ones just beginning, coming on. But, I think probably mostly there was 10 or a dozen, 6, 8. A few, some come occasionally from the other islands. Reynolds' father went to school there for a while, Wolcott, and Winslow Hattie. They boarded either with the Browns or they came back and forth from Bear Island. They went to school there for a time. There was a school on Great Spruce Head for a while too. The little building still there, right behind the caretaker's house was a schoolhouse. It's never had another name. A lot of them, other islands, their names have changed around, but stories about it, which don't hold up, but one that I grew up with a kid. If you're coming from Northwest Harbour, going out by Hadhead towards the Eagle, you're looking at it that way with Fling Islands off to one side and the porcupines to the other, and the lighthouse always painted the tower white and everything with the white head, so it looks like an eagle. But it was Eagle Island 70 years before there was a lighthouse. I don't think that was it. I guess one would assume possibly nesting eagles. I don't know. They're coming back. I guess we have to leave. You can't be within 500 feet.
Yeah.
We got 100 yards below the house there. In the winter, the population gets pretty sparse. There isn't anyone that night, but we'll be home tomorrow. It's just Lean and I. Our daughter and her husband was there for 3 or 4 years, but they've been in Camden for the winters, and so it's just Lean and I. And the summer goes the other way. The population is up. There's more places, and it can be 50 or 60, depending. We have places we rent, and some, if all the places are occupied, I don't think they ever all are, because, you know, people come at different times for their vacations.
Any animals?
Yep, we got a sheep and a dozen hens.
What more can you ask for?
I suppose the cow, but you hit the cow, you would never get away. Milk twice a day, so, yeah.
Bob, I know about the sheep, but what you mentioned eagles. What about other wildlife out there, and how's that's changed over the years?
Yeah, other wildlife. Yeah, Matt, you would know about the sheep, wouldn't you? Put an ad in the paper a few years ago. Said 2 ram lambs said they're too good to slaughter, so they give them away with hay enough to get them through the winter. It happened to be the year that a daughter wanted to move back to Eagle. She'd been to college and been working in Camden for a while, and she wanted to come back, and said, you know, not live in an apartment. She wanted to be where she could have green grass and have animals or something. So I called up Nat and took him up on his offer, and I got this little ram lamb. Well, he's about that high now, and he's about that long, about that big around.
Probably needs a little more hay, too.
Yeah. I gotta go to Eldrith tomorrow and get a few babies. But we've had a lot of fun with him. We enjoy, and he does a good job, because we built him a corral, and our water supply, we catch rainwater off the roof, and the tank is up on the hill house, and then we get gravity feed down at our house, and black plastic pipe, and so we built the ram's pasture over, and it incorporates that pipe, and he keeps the grass mowed down, and the sun shines on the pipe, and keeps them hot running water. What more could you ask? Other livestock, other animals, Nat, I guess the biggest change is the deer, which came in the late 50s, I guess. I suppose with the farms dying out, fewer people or whatever. There wasn't any deer there in my father's generation, or I think the one before him. But starting then, the deer population started to build up, and probably in the 70s, 80s, they got to nuisance proportion, and then people, hunters, begin to get onto it and come to hunt, and it's sustained pretty much now. It actually seems to be dropping the last 2 years, and we don't know why, because we kind of keep a handle on the hunting there, and they take usually 8, and the rest of it is the birds, and not a lot of that, you know, because we're out in the field, right in the middle of the island, and the wind blows a hair right off your head, and so we don't have much luck with birds around the bird feeder. We get blue jay and a couple of doves have showed up now, but this winter there was hardly any. But we see the eagles are real prominent in the winter. Plenty of eagles.
Crows?
Pardon?
Do you get crows?
Oh, yeah. Crows and ravens, you know. Ravens are something that has come back. They have conventions, you know. I have seen the trees black with them. You can count 200, and they're all talking at the same time. I don't know what it's all about. Here's something that's happened the last few years: otter. I really doubted myself. I'd seen the tracks, but and then I began to see the slides in the snow where the otter will, the little slopes. But last fall, I was just after I took my traps up, I was on the wharf there one day, and I see something off outside my boat. Looked like a crooked stick there rolling around the water, but all of a sudden down he went, and he come along, popped up, and he come right in round the dock, and there was a little harbour pollock in amongst the crib work there, and I watched him for half an hour. He'd go down in there and get one of them, crawl up, chew him up, back in there. Oh, he's 3 foot long, something like that. But they've been around a few years. The first tracks I saw, I followed in the snow, and they went into a swamp, found a little hole under a stump where there was some open water, and they go for fresh water. Actually, where Hancock County refers to us as Plantation 8. We register our cars in Ellsworth at the county courthouse and things like that, and they lump us all in together at Plantation 8, so we fall in with the northern parts of Hancock County have a lot of unorganized. They lump us
So
in.
it's always been that way, Bob? It was
Yes.
never affiliated with this?
No, with Deer Isle on North Avon. See, we get island towns on either side of it in our endeavor for our dump sticker. When we started out with that and met with the county commissioners, and it took quite a lot of persuasion to convince them that we were part of Hancock County. If there even was such a thing as, they knew there's an Eagle Island north of Swans Island. It's just a little bit of a thing with a few spruce trees on it, but for some reason people had heard of that, but yeah, it was kind of comical, in some ways. We have had a residence in Stonington. We lived down there while our kids went to school, and so we've been residents of Stonington, but that changed Monday. So, we actually sold our house in Stonington just this week, so we will, I believe we'll vote absentee through Deer Isle.
Do you have any more of your Uncle Bonnie's poems with you?
Yeah, I do.
I read you what we think might have been the first one he wrote. He kept at it for a while, and he, just nothing very serious, and kind of has to do with country living. It did occur to me that, a lot of people ask us, well, what's it like out there in the winter? But, well, I can tell you what he thought it was like one winter. It says, if a tale of woe you wish to hear, lean towards the south, your shell-like ear. Just listen close, let quiet reign, mayhap this song will ease my pain, but damned if I believe it. The radio says warm and clear, paper says the spring is near, says take the woolens off your toes, and take your coat sleeve off your nose. I ain't gonna do it. I'm building boats and cutting ice, and I jam my toes and frozen twice. The north winds blow me where they please, my eyebrows froze and joined the breeze, and am I aggravated? My brain's congealed inside my head, and the thing froze up beneath my bed. The snow piles up around my door, and all the while the blizzards roar, but still you ain't heard nothing. This cold is driving me to drink. It froze the sore and the sink. Now every time I take a pill, I run outdoors and down over the hill. Hooray for Sears and Roebuck. Now the bathroom door is open wide and the throne of dreams is still inside. On its base no sewer goes. Last Friday night the cesspool froze. I'm going on a diet. Now the set tub leans against the wall and down the pipe no bubbles fall. I cannot scrub my BVDs. Oh, why the sewers have to freeze, especially in winter. The little house with sagging door is never vacant anymore. And the faded pictures on the wall don't hold no charms for me at all the last of January. I used to sit and hang my feet and carve initials on the seat. Days like these, it ain't no fun. I swiftly grab my pants and run. The wind blows up with such a gale, I freeze my round, exquisite tail. I'd rather pay a pound of gold than have that end of me get cold. It's really quite annoying. And that sewer pipe is buried down beneath 4 feet of frozen ground. I'll have to dig it up, I guess. There's nothing else to do unless I live on cheese and crackers. Now when fishing, I remember how we'd down our pants and oar the bow. We shivered on those frozen stays, but it's got chick sails beat 7 ways. I think I'll build a schooner. Now the catalog you surely think is heavy paper and would sink. When those breezes fetch a squall, it flitters round from wall to wall, the dog will have to catch it. I've plowed the field twixt here and there, and the wind has blown the furze bare. And if I run at night on new plowed ground, I sure as hell will tumble down. And that might be disastrous. Now when you sit and hear the storm, you're in your bathroom snug and warm, just place your elbows on your knees and thank the Lord your stern don't freeze. Excuse me, but I'm jealous.